This is the Unshadowed Thought Podcast with James Hall. This podcast is dedicated to Michelle Goyevich, Ed White, Caitlin Treacle, and I Chan, and also all the others that have lost their life as a direct result of psychiatric harms.
Welcome back. Anybody who's listening out there, glad you're continuing to listen, or glad you stopped by for this one. So on the last one, I mentioned that I think I'm constantly rethinking my life, like on a daily basis, and how I've thought of things and how I think about things now, and almost every different aspect of my life based on going through a 23-ish day prolonged water fast, because so many things have changed. And then I get perspective and I see how things are different, or the new direction things are taking versus the way they used to. And as I think through those things, and as I have more and more perspective, I want to share them with you. I think one of the primary, just a really big issue that I noticed with water fasting, when reading the books and seeing people's testimony and then going through it myself, it was interesting, but some of the things I've seen and the people I've seen try to relate, like the benefits of water fasting and stuff. For instance, there was a movie that these two Aussies made about, they did a 20-day water fast and then a 20-day juice fast. I think it's called The Healer Within. When they, at the end, they kind of talked about the benefits that they had seen and what hadn't healed. And that part of the movie was really, really vague. I was really looking forward to seeing like some, like, I saw the changes, right? But you're not inside their bodies, so you don't really know what's changing or what's not, or in terms of their experiential stuff on a daily basis. So I was really looking forward to the end of saying, because one guy dealt with chronic pain. I think the other guy just wanted to do it with him to clean up his body. But there's so many things I wanted to hear from them about different dimensions of their life and their human experience, and then their physiological experience, their mental experience, their psychological experience, all this stuff. But at the end, they really wrapped it up really quick, and they didn't have very much to say. And so that was the kind of the perfect example of what I feel like I saw in other spots with other testimony and then in the literature and things, is that I think it's really difficult to really classify and quantify what happens on the fast, like before and after, because there's this long period where you're fasting, you really start to forget the way you felt before. And then you're in this new kind of life now. And it's hard to compare the two. And I think people are at a loss. I think doctors are at a loss to observe like what it is, because so much of it is internal and experiential. And then people, I think, are at a loss to express it, because so many things do change, and so many of those changes are subjective and experiential. And then again, they happened like almost a month previous, right? And then even when you fast, say you fast for not even a month, say you fast for like 3 weeks, right? And then you're refeeding for another 3 weeks, right? So now you're at like a month and a half of time that's passed. And this is, you know incredibly impactful time. Like it's it'd be like asking, someone who survived a plane crash, right? What was it like before the plane crash, right? And they might not be able to relate, because they went through so much trauma or so much intense, emotion and stuff, where they'd be like, man, my life after the plane crash feels like a different life entirely. After people go through extreme events, like that next breakfast or the next meal they have is the best of their lives, right? Is what they tend to claim. And so that, I think, is why, right? Like when things shift really dramatically or really impactfully or really seriously, it's really hard to quantify what did things used to be like. I just know the way they are now, and I'm more appreciative of my life, whereas before I didn't care, right? All kinds of stuff. So there's like the physiological and psychological, experiential, spiritual, like there's all of these changes, right? So the point, I probably elaborated too long on that, but I think for people that haven't fasted yet, it'll get that, you just saying that will give them some perspective on what it's like. But because I recognize that in everything I've seen so far, it seems like there's this lack of information. I decided it would be a good idea to talk about this on an ongoing basis, because as I've gone through things, what I realized the reason for that was is that too many things have changed. There's too many things I've noticed that are different. There's too many things that have shifted. There's too many things that continue to improve. And some things like you might go through stress and you experience it completely different now than you did before. Like previously I had akathisia, and now I've had some panic and some stress that are, I think, fair to what's been happening to me, right? And I have also thoughts around it, like, oh, am I going back? Am I relapsing? And I'm like, no, this isn't anything as bad as akathisia was before. I know that much, but this is really unpleasant. I don't like this, but it's from something I would expect it to be from. So how long will it last? Is it in the right proportion? You know, there's all these ridiculous thoughts that go through your mind. You know, I'm just so busy trying to figure this out instead of just, you know, living it and accepting it, which is something I'm working on. But there's so much of that going on that it's almost impossible to relate. I mean, generally people don't ask you specific questions that are not like, you know, how has your metabolism changed? You know, how do you digest food now, right? You generally don't hear that. You just hear, oh, what's improved? And when someone asks you a vague question like that, it's just like, there's no way to answer it. There's too much going on, and there's too many different subjective kind of like experiential things that are important that you wouldn't, that would be hard to relate because there's so much information and it's so idiosyncratic and so specific to you, so subjective, right? That sort of stuff. So it's hard to answer those questions. I mean, no one's asked me any specific questions about my fast so far. And I've had the same problem. People are like, hey, how you doing since the fast? How do I answer that question? It's like, it's impossible. I'm like, well, I'm better in so many ways, but some things are kind of the same. There's like my cognition hasn't really improved, but my metabolism, my digestion, my energy, you know, all these other things have made these drastic improvements that just improved my quality of life so much. I'm just much happier. And then my emotions just became a full real range of emotion, and I feel real again, and all this other stuff, you know, and all that stuff. It actually tends to be really vague too, just trying to describe it to you now. Plus people don't have an hour to listen to you. So for that reason, I'm going to try to pick out topics and cover them as time goes on, so people can, if they listen to them, if they want to take the time to listen, they can start to understand the full spectrum of what happens after a prolonged water fast. And then as time goes on, hopefully I'll check in and tell you like my progress, and if things have started to revert back or whether they've continued to stay positive. I can tell you a lot of my emotions feel so good and all these things right after the fast, for the month after the fast. And now it feels that I'm getting used to it. I'm getting used to feeling more normal and all these different things. So sometimes I'm like, oh, am I reverting? And then when I think about it, it's like, no, I'm not reverting, but I am getting used to the way life is now. And it's better. So, you know, I kind of have this new normal. So I'm trying to figure that out. But as I do, I'll quantify it and kind of describe it in a way that people can understand, so you guys can get the full picture. But today I'm talking about some thoughts I had last night and this morning that I thought were really, really, really important. So I'll preface it, right? So right now I want to talk about changes in my tribe, changes in my community or my immediate family. That these are changes that have happened because of my fast, and it might not be in the ways that you think. So I've talked a little bit previously about neuroplasticity and changes to my mind that have happened since the fast. I've mentioned that like when I was on my fast, my routines changed, all kinds of stuff changed to be, I had more impact on it. It was more of what I wanted to do. And sometimes I didn't know what to do. So I reverted back to my old like psychology or thinking or way of being. And then some things I knew what I wanted to change. So I changed them really radically. And this is one of them. I think maybe I'll do a podcast in the future about how I see like family, raising kids, you know, being married and all that kind of stuff for people that want to hear it. To me, I take that stuff extremely seriously. It comes before everything else. I'm someone kind of virtue, or at least I try to be, right? Everyone falls short, but I really try to work on being compassionate, kind, loving, thoughtful, have fortitude, discipline, you know, all these different virtues. I work on them regularly and try to just show up and do well for myself and others. So that being said, like family means everything to me. But don't even have to say it's family. Like you could translate that to be friends or to people or to myself. Like people are just a reflection of how you treat yourself, right? To some degree. So like if someone's like, "Hey, will you help me out with this?" And I say yes, I will show up. And if I don't, or I can't, or I usually call I call and be like, "Hey, it's not more of a, hey, I can't show up. It's a, hey, this came up for me. Are you okay if I skip out or do something else?" And usually people will be understanding, they'll be like, "Yeah, that's fine. It makes sense." Right. But that's how important it is to me. Like, I'm going to show up. One of my friends is in danger or family's in danger, like gladly lay down my life to protect theirs. Um, and or I mean, even a stranger, like it's just been a thing for me. And I've done that. Maybe some interesting stories will come up on a future podcast. But it's just been the way I've striven to be. So the reason why I was thinking about relating my ideas about family and how I operate is because I think other people find it useful, um, to grow, to look at, to think, give them to think, and then maybe to grow on, and create their own ideas, and maybe it'll help people that are struggling. It could be anything, but I take it really seriously. So I think people could gain things from me. Some things I don't have a lot of insight into, but the things that I do, I want to share for people that want to listen. So anyways, so I take my family seriously, right? So we all get along really, really well. And part of that is because I've being the dad, the father figure. And this just comes natural to me, right? I see this is the only way I've ever existed, whether it's a friendship, family relationship, a working relationship, whatever. I show up, I'm realistic, I'm honest, I do the work, and I'm really kind of authoritative, like in terms of like, this is right, this is wrong. If you object, that's fine. Let's discuss it and then together figure out what's right. I'm okay admitting when I'm wrong, but I'm not going to just, what I am not is someone who sees something that's wrong and then just keeps their mouth shut or just lets it go by. Right. I'll at least make a note of it. I'll deal with it. I'll bring it up later. I'll do whatever I have to do in the best context, to address it. If I think that means now's not the right time, I'll wait till later and address it later. But, I don't just let stuff go. So in that being said, like my family, we all get along really, really well. I could not be happier with my family. And that's because I've always put in the work and everybody else has put in the work, like from day one. Like we show up for each other and we talk to each other and we're honest with each other and we all work on our virtue a bit. But so that's kind of the baseline of how things work. Like we're pretty functional as is, but there's conflicts, right? Like there's certain emotions you see coming up regularly, right? On around the same topics. And like there's always conflict, right, around this thing. And we'll stop and we'll talk about them. We'll make time to talk about them because in my mind, you always have to make time to talk. The second you stop making time to talk about things that are important, you start losing people. And I'm not particularly happy with, or I had a lot of difficulty growing up with the family structure that I had. It was very broken. Certainly people had much more broken childhoods and families than I have, but mine didn't function very well. There's good things about it. There's bad things about it. Right. But I ventured off on my own and made my own mistakes because I didn't feel included. The people wouldn't talk to me, right? Like people didn't put in the effort for me, so I didn't put in the effort for them. And as a kid, that's how I saw things. I wish I saw them differently, but that's the way that I went. That's how I learned. So now everybody shows up, especially the adults show up for the kids, like always. So that being said, there were certain patterns I noticed, right? There was conflict around these things, or certain people, certain ones of us like wouldn't have things we don't like to do, right? And I'd be like, and I usually talk about it at some point, it'd come up like, create an issue with someone else, like, someone didn't want to do a chore or whatever, and they'd get lazy and they wouldn't do it. And someone else would end up doing it, and then they would come around later and someone would argue or something or whatever, or we'd just try to talk about it with each other and it would be a little heated, even though it was just kind of a straight up deal. But so anyways, there's stuff, just like every other family, there's stuff and there will always be stuff. In my mind, it's just a matter of how you handle it. But so the pre-fast, like I was trying to do everything I could to address the issues, but there's a lot of them and they come up and you're busy and stuff goes on. And we always talked about them, but you have to do so much more than talk. You got to take the time. You got to put in the work. If someone is struggling with, a fear, you got to take the time, you got to stop what you're doing, you got to address the fear, you got to revisit it and revisit it until they feel comfortable. Say it's a kid driving a car, right? A teenager driving a car and they're uncomfortable in the car. In my mind, like, you can't drive unless you can be comfortable and be safe, right? Um, you have to get there, right? So that means you got to spend time in the car. Like, if you can't parallel park, you got to parallel park over and over and over again until you feel like it's easy, until you feel like it's comfortable. And that goes along with neuroplasticity, right? You got to build that routine. You got to have a positive mindset about it, and you got to continue to do it and build a pattern until you have the muscle memory and you can just do it, right? You can't, if it's something that's important, you gotta put in the time and effort, and you got to learn, right? If you don't understand it, you got to learn. And you got to put in the time on the theoretical knowledge, and then you got to put in the practical experience, and you got to mesh them together to be good at what you want to do. And I just remember being young, or being a teenager, and not being good at things, but not knowing how to get good at things. And I wish someone had been there to show me, like, this is how you get good at something. This is how you get proficiency and then mastery over things. And all I had was brief explanations from people that would tell me, oh, do this and do that, and I'd do it, and it wouldn't work, usually because there wasn't the discipline to continue doing it and other things. But anyway, so this is kind of where I'm sitting, where, like, I'm really happy with everything generally, right? But certain things are getting dropped and certain things aren't progressing, and I was kind of unhappy with that. And just knowing that I had more to give my kids, my wife, and my family than I was. But I get busy, distracted, I'm harmed. Like, I just, so many days I feel like crap and I just don't do anything extra, right? I'm already working with not much, so I should be pretty proud of myself for managing to keep all this together. So many people end up, like, divorced and in horrible relationships because of their injury, but for me, I've spent the time and energy that I do have, or that I could muster, giving it back to my family, because that's kind of what gave me hope and what kept me alive. If I didn't have my family, I'm pretty sure, I'm almost positive I'd be gone. So that was part of how I've kept myself alive and how I've healed. Yeah, at the small degree that I had so far before the fast, that's kind of what kept me going, and that's what I put my energy into, and that's what I look forward to every day. So anyways, totally digressing here, but so once I fasted, when I came off my fast, I had all this, like, mental and physical energy to stop and talk to my family more and implement routines that would kind of make a difference between all of us. So I can't. So we'll look at what happened, and then we'll try to figure out why, right? So before fasting, like, we just kind of address things as they come up and make mental notes to try to, if we need to be repetitive about something, hey, the next time, you know, you get in an argument, like, try not to do this, try not to do that, try not to talk about the past and focus on the future. Try to stay positive and not show so much anger, right? Like, we all want to try to work together in a positive direction, because we all know we love and care about each other. So that's what we want to do, right? Don't get so angry about things that we can't change. We can look at what we can change, and we can focus on that. Different things like that, right? So we just do that, kind of like shoot from the hip with it, and we'd keep talking about it, thinking that would make a difference. But down deep, I knew that until we actually started doing things about it, there wouldn't be any change. It's very hard. You got to hear someone a lot of times, maybe an infinite amount of times, before you actually do something about it. Because there's, like, different kinds of learners, kinetic learners, audio, visual, all that kind of stuff. Like, people, you're just not retaining it unless when you learn it and then you practice it. You got to keep practicing it once you learn it. So we're doing a lot of learning, but not a lot of practicing. Or, like, we don't argue very often, or you don't have an opportunity to work on a skill or a fear very often. So when it comes up every time, you just haven't done your homework, even though you've done your theoretical learning about it. You just haven't done. So off the fast, man, I was like, hey, we're going to set up some routines. We're going to meet, on a regular basis, and just talk to each other about, what's going on, what we're working on, what we want help with, what we have questions about, kind of if we have disagreements with another person, or we have qualms with what another person is doing and how, we'll bring that up and talk about it and talk it through in an environment where there's no limitations on time. There's no limitations on what can be said. There's no heat of the moment, right? There's no emotions involved. We're just pulling up like at a given time we all agree on. It's talking through the stuff, and being honest about it with a calm mind and not, worked up mind or a fearful mind or anything like that. And we started doing that. And I was after the fast, I was like, we need to sit down and meet every day. And if we can't every day, that's fine. If we miss a day, it's fine. Some days we'll just pull up and be like, hey, I'm just working on the same stuff, and we'll just break. But other days we'll talk for a long time, depending on what's been going on. But we need to meet regularly and just set time where we can do whatever we want with our time, because so much of the day, what I realized on the fast is so much of our day, like your day will always get away from you. You will never make the time you need to do the extra stuff that you need to do, unless you have to do it, right? Unless like the sink's leaking, it's got to be fixed. You'll make time for that, based on how urgently it's leaking, right? But living that, reactive life and not a proactive life, it's not what I want. At least, I mean, to some extent always, but I don't want to live like that anymore. I want to be proactive. I want to work on the things I work on. I want to make a difference in people's lives, not just teach people that may or may not want to learn what I have to say, or maybe interested one moment and then they forgot about it the next. And likewise with the people in my family, I have a lot to learn from them, especially from their perspective and experience. And there's so many things I'm not asking that I'd like to ask, and so many things that I'm not learning from other people's experiences that I need to. Even my kids, even others, they see and experience things that I could benefit a tremendous amount from, and I'm just not doing that. So this time that I set up gives us the space to do that and the freedom to do that. And before the fast, I just couldn't get it done. After the fast, for some reason, I just getting it done, right? And then so after that, that started to cascade the change in the right direction. And then, but once I started doing that, and my mindset shifted, and my regular interaction with people, is a lot more kind of calm and fluid. I was a little bit irritable coming off the fast and more direct with people that caused some conflict, but the conflict didn't get angry. I may have been irritable, or I may have appeared irritable, but really I was just like, kind of like really, really pragmatic and like really honest, much more than I had been in the past, because after the fast, I just like kind of saw life as a more serious thing, I guess, ideologically. But after the fast, I was just always kind of like, no, this is what I see is going on. Like, we can't do something that's wrong, or just ignore something, right, that we need to. And I did a lot of ignoring in the past, even though it wasn't much, probably a lot less than most people. Like, I saw things even clearer during the fast and after the fast. So I became a lot more direct, but I didn't anger as much, right? I was also had a more even keel to where I was like, this is how I see things. Like, let's talk about them. How do you see things? All right, what's the reality here? What can we do about it? And blah, 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 And so once we started meeting, and so here's the key. What I was thinking about this morning and last night was that I started acting differently, and I was much more interested in what other people were experiencing, and I engaged other people more, and I was less angry and more inquisitive, less frustrated and more honest. Everything shifted a bit. And what I found is that, so when I say, before the fast, we were stuck in this kind of ruts where we'd have certain behaviors we're working on and fears and different things. Like, this is a long-standing thing. This is the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years for all of us, that we've been stuck in these ruts, right? And really, really slow to work out, right? Over the years, you might make a little bit of progress. Well, post-fast, what I realized is that my plasticity in my brain, my changes to my personality and my psychology, my mindset, the way I handle things, being more active in trying to make change and talk to people and understand things, right, has shifted everybody's ability to change. Everybody in my house has become more receptive, more proactive, more thoughtful, more patient with each other. And it's kind of blowing my mind. Like, for the first couple of weeks that we did it, it all seemed like it was just not working, right? Like, we were meeting more, we were talking more, but nothing, it was all, everything was just the same. Everyone was the same old person. And it was the same, had the same amount of anger, and we were running in the same number of problems or frustrations or fears, right? But with a little bit of patience, and we just keep doing that, right? Things started to shift, and people are having more discussions. We're having more fun together. All of a sudden people are being really, really honest with me. Like, someone would do something that would irritate someone else. And all of a sudden they were admitting like what they had done wrong instead of trying to deny it or hide it. Right. All of a sudden they're like, I'm sorry I did that. This is what I did. I've been working on that. And, it's important that I make change. That was a good opportunity for to make change or whatever, using their own language, you know? And I'm just like, wow. So over the last few weeks, that's been going on. And as a family, we've gone out and done some things, and usually it's fairly quiet. We talk a little bit, have a little bit of fun, but the last few times, like, we've been in really deep conversations about a lot of different stuff and having a lot of fun, like where you really laugh hard, and then, just the texture of our relationships has just grown so much and become so much deeper that before I knew we were all connected, but I felt like maybe the adults were kind of connecting things for the kids, and vice versa in some regard. Everyone, is trying hard at some point to keep us connected, right? And there was this work around it because people didn't care maybe as much at some times as others. But now I'm feeling connection that is, everyone is just driving itself, right? The connection is there. Everyone wants to be connected. Everyone is bonded to each other in a way that kind of self-perpetuating, and everyone wants to be there and contribute and to talk and to share, and we're all loved and appreciated equally by all of each other. It's just wild, because in the past that was all true, but there's just a different level of it, right? Like, at times it didn't necessarily feel that way. Now, like, it just more consistently, more often feels much deeper, more honest, and more loving. And I mean, I was just out of my mind happy with it when I realized this stuff last night. And then I was like, what changed? And then I realized the fast. And then I realized that I was probably, I mean, as an adult male in the house, for whatever that means. I mean, I'm just using that as a descriptor. Like, now it means something completely different than it did throughout history. And I understand, I'm not trying to frame that in any way or that it means anything. It doesn't mean anything to me, except for the fact that I just am who I am. And I tend to, people tend to look at me as the bad guy or the tough guy, or, the guy they don't want to talk to. But I feel like after the fast, I started signaling, in some kind of subconscious way that, people could be more comfortable, or things could shift or change. And I think there is a group, a social consciousness, a tribal consciousness among, the people around me. And it started to shift and change just based on what I went through with my fast. Just one person kind of explaining and showing and working through what I've learned on my fast, right, with everybody else. And they're all involved. They're seeing me every single day. They saw me every single day on my fast. They understand that it's transformative in a way that I did not understand. This is a tribal kind of transformation that I'm seeing now, and it's making things much richer, much deeper, much fuller. And that just blows my mind when I started thinking through this stuff and trying to figure out why things were starting to be different, and I was getting different feelings, and I think everybody else is getting different feelings too. It was really an amazing thing when I thought about what the genesis of that was. So that's something I wanted to share. I mean, and I've been having these conversations with my friends and people in my extended kind of tribe and network as well. And some of them, not very many of them, but a few of them, kind of blow it off and they kind of, look at me funny. And then a lot of other ones, like, their just wheels start spinning in their head, and they're taking in and they're asking questions. I'm just filling in with all kinds of details. And they're just like, wow, like, there's things that are changed. The pieces are being put together for them, just like they were being put together for me when I was learning this stuff and then experiencing it. we're all really, really linked, and we're all really, really unified in ways we don't understand. But a good example of that is seeing, you know, the uselessness, the useless rubbish that's portrayed on media all the time, and all the bad ideas that's just constantly pushed on media, the destructive, money hungry, uh, medicalized danger and harm that's going on out there. It's just, it's being pushed so hard so often, but everyone is buying into it. Everyone's getting sucked up by it, right? Why is that? It's because we have, we're wired for a certain amount of groupthink, um, for our community and for our environment and the people around us, right? Like, we are meant to suck that stuff up. We are meant to operate as a whole. We are meant to take care of each other and to trust each other. That's the way things have always been. That's how human beings have existed. And we're using it to our horrible detriment right now. But just look at it. Look how invasive it is. Look how it's everywhere, right? You have the same power to make those changes in even more forceful and powerful ways, but for the good. Like, once people can see real positive change and see the mechanics of it and how it works, you can totally destroy, the influence of all the media and stuff around you that's just whimsically throwing repetitive messages out there, and then everyone else is repeating them, right? You can go the opposite way. You can make it happen. This is a freaking good way to do it that I never thought, in a million years that I would come across, or that would be, a realistic thing that I would see materialize. But here we are. So that's enough for that for right now. So that was one concept. Another one that I was thinking about was, again, over the last like 24 hours or so, I was thinking about, kind of the way, now when I eat a lot, because I'm eating a lot, like after your fast, like if you don't pay attention and keep it under control, like you're kind of, or at least me, I don't, other people might be different, and that's wonderful. But for me, I'm compelled to just keep eating. Like, I kind of mechanically just keep feeding myself whatever food is around since the fast, which, like evolutionarily, that makes sense, right? Like, if you're in a fast or a famine, and then you come off that, like your body, you're just going to want to pack on the calories and the pounds. And so, like, I am just really compelled to do that. So I really have to limit myself. But as I do, I've been like overeating a bit. And now that I'm 2 months off the fast, is like, I do not feel great after when I overeat. And I'm doing it, like, I'm kind of subconsciously trying to force myself to do it all the time. And so I've had a few, like this week and last week, like I've had moments or a day where I didn't feel well. I'm like, why did I eat so much food? This is so dumb, So I have to kind of reverse what I'm doing, and I'm doing some intermittent fasting and stuff to try to get myself to just eat the correct amount of food. But when I was thinking about that, the thought that came to me is that when I was fasting, I'm burning through 1 pound a day, right, of my nutritional reserves in my body. Now think about that. For a guy that's 6 foot, it's not odd for him to weigh 170 pounds, right? It's probably the average weight for someone that's 6 foot. Actually, it's probably horrible in America. Like, the average weight is probably like 200 pounds or like 180 or 90, right? If you're 6 feet tall and you're a male, right? That's just the number I have because I look at it all the time. If I'm researching or whatever, right? But I mean, I was happy at 160, but when I was on Candida Cure and stuff, man, I was about 150, bouncing between 145 and 150, depending on how lean I was eating. And I saw that as a really good weight for me. And historically, if you look at people's weights, that's more accurate to what people were actually at when food was available in a more realistic way. But now you're talking 180, 190. So think about this through a perspective of hunger and fasting, right? Like, so if we look at it, when I was fasting, I lost 1 pound a day on average, right? Sometimes I lost a little bit more, sometimes I lost a little bit less. And I know there's other numbers out there, but that's just what I experienced, right? So I think I was like 147 when I started. I was down to like 123 at the end or something like that. And just throwing those numbers out there, I don't remember exactly. So, I lost approximately like 23, 24 pounds, something like that, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. So it ended up roughly being 1 pound a day. and I was already lean, right? And I was fine with that. It's totally fine. But when you're thinking about how much you're consuming in a day, and I mean, I'm consuming like I'm just probably eating like 3 regular meals, but they're just really full meals, right? But I finish my plate and then maybe I'll look for a snack in between meals or something. And I'm looking at the volume of the food. I'm probably eating more than a pound of food a day for sure, right? Probably several pounds like in totality. And then I'm putting on weight. Now I'm up to like 150 from what I was. And I mean, I put on weight really fast. And I'm just like, my body doesn't need this, right? Like, even if I'm at 150, and I mean, in a extreme situation, say I'm dropping down to 125, right? I have 25 days worth of food on my body right now, and I'm very lean, right? If I was back in my normal weight, like 180, like back, when I was working and just doing the daily American thing, right? Just eating and working, not, and even running sometimes, working out sometimes, but not a lot, right? 180, you're talking, you have 60 pounds, like 55, 55 pounds of nutrition packed onto your body. You have like 2 months worth of reserves packed onto your body. But here's the kicker. And then you're eating how much in a day? You're eating 2 or 3 pounds of food a day, right? And your body has to neurologically has to use the energy and the bandwidth like to try to process that food through when your reserves are already like maxed out, and you're putting more food into your body than it probably would ever want or need in a day. And then people are talking about how fasting is starving. You're starving yourself, right? Like, this is just really, really far from the truth, and this really seems obtuse to me. um People are so far removed from what human existence has been in the past. Like, we didn't have food storage, right? Like, you had to eat what you could find in a given day, and your body was burning through your reserves in whatever way, like all the time. Now that I've done some small fast and intermittent fasting and did the longer fast, right? If I skip a day, if I don't eat for a day right now, I don't even notice a difference. Like, I don't get cranky. I don't get tired and all this weird stuff. Like, so I'm asking myself, is this what it was like evolutionarily? If this was like back in history, when people regularly didn't go to eat for a day and you couldn't store food, like, it doesn't supposed to bother you. And what impact does that have on our health and our neurology, right? Specifically, our brain and our spine, and all of our nerves, that and all the regulation of all of our organs and everything, right? What impact does that play? When now, like, you skip one meal and they're hangry and they're cranky and their body's doing all this weird stuff, right? What's the difference between that and where I'm at right now, where I'd say I'm probably more in line with like the ancients or the people in history that didn't have food storage, right? Like, you're going to miss a day's worth of food. You're going to miss 2 or 3 days worth of food, right? Maybe, you know? And then, is it going to even bother you? What are going to be the shifts that happen in sort of your body? What kind of downstream impacts do those have and stuff, and what is the cost? I mean, this is a really traditional question for medicine, right? Everyone looks at this like, what's the cost of carrying around 2 months worth of food on your persons all the time? What does that do to you? What's the significance of them? There's significance of it. What's the significance of having no nutritional stores on your body, right? You go to either extreme and there's going to be an impact. But the question is, like, for me, after having just done that fast and being in the mindset that I am now and having done the things that I am now, like, it's just really significant. Putting into perspective the way everybody looks at food and the way people understand it is really, really important to me. And what I've learned, I want to share with people so they can look at things through the same perspective. I mean, one, if you fast and you and your body handle food in the way that we have historically, right? You're going to handle not eating food like really, really differently, right? And you're going to be fine. It's not a big deal. But think about it, like people that have lived 60 or 70 years without ever missing more than a meal, certainly not a day's worth of food, right? Like the whole way their body operates and handles processes nutrients is going to become probably, I'm willing to guess, pretty vastly different than someone that fasts regularly, and their body has no problem going out without food for a day or two. Doesn't, you don't even notice it, right? The really big difference between the two. I think that sparks a lot of questions. But for me, I started looking at things a little bit differently since my fast. I'm like, man, every pound that I have on my body extra, that's a day I can go without food. And I only need water, you know? Of course, based on your environment or how hard you're working, right? But generally speaking, nowadays, you know, we're not under a lot of physical demand, or we don't have a necessity for that. So no, I don't have a lot of insight on that. It's just something I realized, and something I realized that shifted since the fast, how I look at things. And I think how I was framing that up for myself was that not feeling well, but still feeling compelled to eat, like eat these big meals now that I've gotten back past the weight that I was before. Like I really need to reframe my thinking and take a step back as my body, you know, starting to speak to me and tell me like, you're getting tired, you don't feel well, like you've been eating too much for too long. And I'm only like 150 and I'm 6 foot. Like I'm just hitting probably the average BMI for Americans. I might even still be under a little bit, right? And my body's already sending me signs that that I'm consuming too much food, right? And things are slowing down, and maybe I'm a little inflamed, you know? It's something I have to really seriously consider. So I wanted to share those thoughts with people to give them some perspective, and then about not only about the fast, but the way they look at food. So that's where I'm at for today. Again, really glad if you're listening. I hope you found that interesting. But all stuff that these thoughts never would have gone through my head. Certainly the way they are now before I did the prolonged water fasting experience, the things I did. So I want to share that. Hope everybody's hanging in there. Take it easy. I'll talk to you soon.